The worst weather of winter has yet to come for many areas in the United States, as the polar vortex is about to unleash a ton of Arctic air across the United States next week, which will lead to some of the coldest weather that we've seen in years, in addition to record-breaking temperatures. In addition to all of this, we are anticipating a huge storm this weekend, which is going to lead to a significant severe weather outbreak, and as much as 12 to 18 inches of snow could fall in some areas. So in today's forecast, we're going to break down exactly what you need to know about the weather that'll be impacting the United States over the next 10 days, and we'll begin with what's happening across the country today. And we have a huge storm that is now moving ashore from the Pacific Ocean. It is impacting a lot of areas along the west coast. We've had tons of rain falling back over in California over the past 24 hours. Upwards of 5 to 7 inches of rain fell in some locations, and we actually had a brief water spout that may have been a tornado back over in southwestern California yesterday. Overall, though, this is all moving now inland, and we are anticipating this to be a huge storm Saturday and into Sunday across areas like the Midwest, the Southeast, back into the Ohio Valley, and it will impact many areas up and down the East Coast, where we are anticipating the threat for a severe weather outbreak, very heavy snowfall, and significant flash flooding. So a lot of stuff we're going to be talking about in this forecast, in addition to the very significant Arctic blast that we're also expecting next week. The worst weather of winter is likely next week, as we are anticipating some of the coldest weather that we've seen in years, in addition to even some more snowfall. So let's go ahead and check out the jet stream here over the next few days. Beginning with what's happening this weekend, we are going to have a huge system moving across the central and southern plains, which is going to lead to a severe weather outbreak back over in the Ohio Valley, even back into the southeast. And we'll also have heavy snowfall back over in areas like the Midwest and also back through the northeast. In addition to that, very cold air will come in from behind this, but this isn't necessarily going to be the Arctic air that we are forecasting as we go into next week. Eventually, as we go into Monday into Tuesday, notice how the wind is mostly coming out of the northwest or west. This is going to lead to a lot of cold air, one, coming out of Canada, and also some cold air coming right over the mountainous regions back over in the Rockies. And we think as we go into Tuesday into Wednesday, this is all going to build into a really sharp area of cold air. Many areas could be as much as 40 to 60 degrees below average, which is actually really crazy. I mean, we're talking about the threat here for record-breaking low temperatures and hazardous cold across the Great Plains as we go into both Tuesday and Wednesday. Eventually, as we go into Thursday into Friday, things start to become a little bit better. However, if we do see northwesterly flow continue even into next weekend and the jet stream is dipped this far down to the south, all of that cold air is going to usher into areas like the East Coast and the Southeast, and it could get very cold over there, but things should start to improve back over in the Great Plains, and then we should eventually see a domino effect where most areas in the United States are back to around or above average temperatures by the last week of February. Now let's go more into detail about exactly how cold it is going to be getting as we go into next week. And before we go into that, I do want to mention that this here is the temperature anomalies. It indicates the departure from average in terms of the temperature. So let's go ahead and look at what's happening as we go throughout this weekend. For the most part, pretty normal for most of the United States, around or just above average temperatures for most of the eastern seaboard and also back into the southern plains. However, we will have some colder air back over in the central and northern plains, many areas 20 to 30 degrees below average, which honestly is pretty cold, but it's not as cold as what we're thinking is going to happen next week. Eventually, as we go into Monday, some of that cold air spills into areas like the Ohio Valley and Southeast, around 10 to 20 degrees below average. But notice back up here into the Midwest and the northern plains, many areas as low as 30 to 40 degrees below average. This isn't the worst it's going to get, because as we go into Tuesday morning and Wednesday morning, notice how that cold air starts to fill in for many areas across the Great Plains, the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and even back up into Montana, where we are expecting a large area as much as 30 to 50 degrees below average, which for this time of the year, this is definitely hazardous cold. I do want to point out that the GFS model, which is the model I'm showing you here, is actually relatively conservative compared to other computer models, which I'm going to show you a few other scenarios in just a moment. As we go into Thursday and into Friday, look how that cold air continues to move across to the east, towards the East Coast, and even into the Southeast, and eventually by next weekend, that cold air will be just kind of sitting, I think, back over in the Ohio Valley before eventually above average temperatures will make a return, I think, for the last week of February. By the way, it feels like every year for the last 4 or 5 years, we've been seeing some sort of big Arctic blast right in the middle of February. It's basically a trend at this point. We're going to have another one this year. This is the European model for reference, with, again, the departure from average in terms of temperatures, has a much colder batch of weather as we go into Wednesday across the central plains and back through Montana, with many areas as much as 40 to 60 degrees below average. In addition to that, the Icon model, which is not a model I am typically a fan of, but it does actually show pretty much the same stuff that we've been showing you here over the last last minute or two, it also indicates a large batch of 40 to 60 degree below average temperatures for many areas in the Great Plains, and it also has this tracking to the east as we go into Friday of next week towards areas like the Ohio Valley, as low as 30 to 50 degrees below average, which is just crazy for this time of the year. I know we're in the middle of February, and obviously it is still winter, but we are talking about some of the coldest weather that we've perhaps seen here in several years. So when we convert this all to actual temperatures, this is what it could look like as we go into Wednesday morning. Notice how we have sub-zero temperatures across many areas in the northern plains back through the Midwest. Many areas could be as low as 30 degrees below zero for actual temperatures. This is not the wind chills. Even back into parts of Texas, we could have some single digits back over in the Panhandle. Thursday morning, not very different. It's actually going to be further to the east into the Midwest and Ohio Valley. Many areas as low as 10 degrees below zero, and even some areas as low as the 20s as far south as the Gulf Coast. I'm not ruling out snow, by the way, even back into parts of the southern plains as we go into the middle of next week. We're going to talk more about that here in just a moment. And then eventually, as we go into Friday into Saturday, that cold air moves east. Not anything out of the ordinary for the most part as we go into Saturday of next week. However, it is obviously still very cold weather, even for February standards. And just for another comparison, this is a bit more of an aggressive scenario right now, which does show as low as single-digit temperatures and even sub-zero temperatures into parts of Oklahoma and Texas by Wednesday. And even as we go into Thursday and into Friday, it still continues to show very cold weather in many areas in the United States. So for now, I would be preparing for this very cold weather next week. There's a very strong signal from a lot of different models for the last several days that is indicating that we are going to have an Arctic invasion that lasts for several days across most of the lower 48, unless you're back over west of the Rocky Mountains. And this is the wind chills Wednesday morning for reference. So these are the feel-like temperatures. Many areas as low as 50 degrees below zero, back into areas like the Midwest and even back into the northern plains. And similar story for Thursday morning. Many areas in the Midwest, Ohio Valley, sub-zero. Could even see sub-zero feel-like temperatures all the way back over into the Dixie Alley, which is not something you see very often. So with all that said, we are going to be tracking this very closely over the next several days. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel, as we will be the first to let you know with any sort of new updates that come out about this Arctic invasion. As we go into the weekend, we have a huge storm that is coming to areas east of the Rockies. Right now, that storm is impacting areas west and along the Rocky Mountains, where we have lots of rain and snow falling. But as we go into tonight and as well as into early tomorrow morning, we are anticipating heavy snowfall to start to ramp up in the Midwest and back into the Northeast. Severe weather is going to become a concern tomorrow afternoon and evening. We are likely going to be live on this channel covering this for several hours, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel and click the bell icon down below so you're notified when we do go live. Eventually, as we go into Saturday night into early Sunday morning, this will continue to track to the east. Heavy rainfall will lead to some flooding. Severe weather will continue to be a threat. We're going to go more in detail about the severe weather in just a moment. Snowfall and freezing rain will ramp up back over in the Midwest, the Great Lakes, and back into New England as we go into Sunday morning. Eventually, by Sunday afternoon, we are going to transition into sleet and freezing rain for many areas in New York and as well central and southern New England. Snow will continue to penetrate on the backside of this low pressure system back through the Great Lakes and the Ohio Valley Sunday afternoon. And eventually, as we go into Monday, this is clearing out. And once we go into next week, we are going to have another chance for a winter weather event back over in the Central Plains, the Midwest, perhaps as far south as Arkansas, Tennessee. This is going to be something we're watching for Tuesday night back over in Missouri and Illinois, with possibly some heavy snowfall, maybe even some freezing rain and sleet as far south as Texas. Might even see a little bit of snow in Texas as well. And then once we go into Wednesday, this is becoming a bit more of a weak system back over in areas like the Mid-Atlantic and back through the Tennessee Valley. But nonetheless, we are going to be tracking this very closely. It even could become something that we're watching for on the East Coast by next Thursday or Friday. There is a signal that there could be some sort of nor'easter, but again, it's just too early to tell what's exactly going to be happening there by Thursday of next week. Let's get past the winter storm that we're seeing this weekend, because this one will really be determined more as we go into the Monday and Tuesday time frame. And then eventually, as we go into next weekend, things look relatively dry, as all that Arctic air is just going to be sitting across many areas in the United States. In terms of snowfall accumulation, we are anticipating a lot of snow as we go into tonight, tomorrow, and Sunday morning in the Midwest. Areas in eastern Wisconsin and central and northern Michigan can anticipate 4 to 8 inches of snowfall. I would expect higher amounts closer to the lakes, in addition to maybe even parts of northeastern Michigan, where we could have a few locations near 10 to 12 inches of snowfall. In general, though, a widespread 2 to 5 inches of snow is expected in most of Iowa, southeastern parts of Minnesota, far northern Illinois, northern Indiana, and even back into parts of northern Ohio. And the Northeast will get the worst of the winter storm. We are anticipating upstate New York to see around 10 to 15 inches of snowfall out of this winter storm this weekend. And then back into most of northern New England, I would expect anywhere from 6 to 12 inches inches of snowfall. Central and southern New England will likely be a lot less. We're talking mostly 2 to 5 inches of snow in these areas. If you're back over in like central southern New Hampshire or Vermont, I would anticipate those totals to be around 5 to 10 inches of snowfall. And then back over New Jersey, Long Island, Pennsylvania, coating to maybe 2 to 3 inches of snow will come out of this winter weather event. In addition to the snow, freezing rain will also be a problem, which will lead to ice accumulation. For now, the forecast is relatively conservative. We are anticipating from the Appalachian Mountains all the way back through Maine to see a glazing, perhaps as high as a 1/10 of an inch of ice accumulation, but I do foresee some areas like southeastern New York and northeastern Pennsylvania picking up as much as a 1/4 of an inch of ice, which could lead to some power outages and also some major travel impacts. And unfortunately, we are likely going to see a severe weather outbreak tomorrow across the southeast, where numerous to widespread damaging winds, large hail, and even several tornadoes, which even a couple of strong tornadoes will be possible, anywhere from areas like Arkansas and as well as Louisiana, all the way back through areas like Kentucky and as far east as Florida and Georgia. So in terms of the setup for tomorrow, the tornado threat does appear to be the greatest late tomorrow afternoon into the early to mid-evening hours. The biggest concern is that we are going to have a line of storms that forms anywhere from Kentucky all the way back into very far southeastern Texas. And what we're going to be watching for is this line of thunderstorms to produce the threat for significant and again possibly widespread damaging winds, in addition to some embedded tornadoes in that line of thunderstorms. Here's where the big question mark is, and this is the reason that we could see some sort of moderate risk at some point for this severe weather setup, is because we could see some prefrontal convection, which means that we could actually see storms form out in front of that line if we get enough forcing. If that ends up happening, a strong tornado threat would be much more elevated, which means we need to watch this very closely. If we do see some sort of upgrade to the risk of severe weather, I would anticipate that to be located back over in parts of central and northern Mississippi, perhaps even back up into southwestern Tennessee, which is not something you see very often this time of the year. So in terms of the timing, we are anticipating a lot of showers and thunderstorms during the morning hours tomorrow, which is actually going to be a training area of showers and thunderstorms. And what I mean by that is that we are going to have a lot of areas of overlapping rain throughout the daytime and even in the evening hours tomorrow, which will lead to the threat for a significant flash flooding threat, especially in Kentucky and Tennessee. As we go later into tomorrow afternoon, that is when we're going to have a large warm sector forming here across the Dixie Alley and the lower Mississippi Valley. The reason why this is concerning is if we get enough forcing out in front of this line of thunderstorms, any sort of semi-discrete or discrete cells that form back over in Mississippi or southern Tennessee will have an elevated threat of producing strong tornadoes. It's a big if as of right now, but if it does happen, we are talking about the potential for a tornado outbreak tomorrow, which is again why we are going to be live on this channel, so make sure you are subscribed down below. Eventually, as we get closer to around 4 to 5 o'clock, this line of thunderstorms becomes a lot more organized, which is going to lead to damaging winds and embedded tornadoes. The HRRR has been indicating the potential for a couple of supercells forming out in front of that line. Not every model has been showing that, but the HRRR so far has been indicating that potential, and if that does end up happening, we have a couple of different concerns on our hand here, including again the line of thunderstorms and the discrete supercells. Even if this does not happen though, we are still talking about an intense line of storms moving across the Mississippi River Valley and eventually tracking east towards the Dixie Alley and even back through Tennessee and Kentucky, where the potential for numerous to widespread damaging winds will be possible. And then eventually, as we go later into the evening hours and into the overnight hours, this line of storms continues to track across central Tennessee, eastern Mississippi, western Alabama, which are areas that just got hit by storms just a couple of days ago, and also back into eastern Louisiana, before eventually by daybreak Sunday morning, this line of storms will continue to produce some isolated damaging winds and a low tornado risk into southeastern Alabama, western parts of Georgia, and also through the Florida Panhandle. And then in terms of rainfall accumulation, we are expecting a large area in Kentucky, Tennessee, and even as far west as northeastern Arkansas to pick up between 2 to 5 inches of rainfall. Many surrounding areas, though, still going to be picking up 1 to 3 inches of rain. If you are in low-lying areas, definitely be ready for this, and unfortunately, areas that were impacted by Hurricane Helene are going to see even more rain here over the next few days. And as always, thank you all so much for watching today's video. If you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe down below and click the bell icon down below so you're notified with the latest updates, as we are likely going to be live tomorrow for well over 6 hours covering the threat for this severe weather outbreak in the southeast. It is going to be a very long day. We have a ton of storm chasers lined up for tomorrow's live stream, in addition to hundreds of live cameras across the southeast. So again, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. I do want to mention that today's video was not able to go as much into detail as I wanted to with the severe weather event, because again, this video is already super long. We never do videos well over 14 minutes long. However, I'll make it up to you guys. We'll either have a very detailed video later this afternoon. If not, we'll have one early tomorrow morning talking all about the severe weather setup and exactly what you need to know, as this is an evolving situation and there will be some changes to the forecast over the next several hours.